Did Joe Biden just nationalize the banking system like right underneath our noses right there? You know, socialist style? When Silicon Valley Bank first went under, the anxiety, rippled through the economy and fears were sparked that it could fuel a domino effect on other banks.
The turmoil from the failure of two major banks, trading was temporarily halted for more than a dozen other regional banks.
We should be prepared for maybe more strain in the system.
Credit Suisse and First Republic Bank both sharply lower this week. That, of course, in the wake of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse.
Regional bank stocks plummet amid questions about whether a financial crisis is looming.
But it did not take long for that Biden administration to swoop right in and guarantee, by the way, using your tax dollars, get that bread, all the money deposited in that bank. They guaranteed it with your money. So if, Joey Bag of Donuts or something had $100 in the bank, don't worry, Joey gets his money back. That all sounds great, right?
The bottom line is this. Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this with whatever is needed on top of all of it.
It will. So Joey Bag of Donuts is $100 is FDIC insured, but what about $1 million or $10 million? So Biden can just guarantee all of those deposits at SVB with your money, by the way. Well, what's stopping him from rescuing every single bank in the entire country? That kind of sounds like a communist-like system. He just said he'd do whatever it's needed to keep other banks from collapsing, even changing the rules. That's why we have rules. That's why they're called rules. So with that precedent now in place, did Biden just effectively nationalize the banking system right underneath our noses right here without anyone realizing it even happened? Because it would only be the biggest economic story of our time. Call me crazy, but I feel like we've kind of seen this scary playbook before. So who else is doing the exact same thing? The government taking over the banks, saying the taxpayers, we're going to run this? Oh, that's right. President Xi Jinping of China. Well, of course. They aren't communists. The Chinese Communist Party's always expanding its police state. Always. That's what communists do. And it already controls its banking system like Joe Biden's going to do now here. Folks, it's not a conspiracy theory or a dopey thing the left's going to throw out at you. It's actually happening right now from the New York Times, quote, while past Chinese leaders sought to maintain a buffer between the party and the private sector, Mr. Xi has erased those lines and made clear that businesses are there to advance the party's agenda. That sounds familiar, kind of like those Democrats who won't let this banking crisis, or any other one, by the way, go to waste. So what's the difference? China, what's happening here? You got a pretty woke bank run by a woke board with woke objectives that goes belly up. And there's that government, there's the G, steps out of the shadows to fix it. Says, we're going to guarantee all those deposits. Even, by the way, foreign investors from China. And who are they going to guarantee with? This is where it's really crazy. They're going to do it with your money. Really? Well, why? What did I do wrong? So why did Silicon Valley Bank fail anyway? Well, they made a mistake. They bet on the United States government when the government sparked an inflation crisis because government can't get anything right. That bet turned out to be a loser. They dropped a big L with that one. So stay with me here. Not only did they invest in government-denominated assets, they also invested in mortgage-backed securities. This story sounds familiar too. Wait, fellas in the control room, did that happen in our lifetime, mortgage-backed? Yes, it did. It did, 2008, 2009. And what happened back then, too? Mortgage-backed securities flopped because of a real estate decline. In this case, caused by inflation, then caused by a lot of bad loan books. And just like that, in came the government to the rescue before. Rescue. And here they come again. Government taking over the banks. Sounds like something already going on in China, where their collapsing real estate market's been propped up by the communist government for years. Got a bunch of empty buildings that people bought that nobody lives in. So who's paying the rent? The answer is nobody. Again, what's the difference? Here's some other parallels between us and China. By the way, refute any of this, libs. I'd love to hear it. Like China, the left wants socialism and government control. Pay close attention. Even Chinese communist government's language is similar to the Democrats. Check this out. Both want bigger government with the help of more regulations, right? Am I wrong? Both ultimately want a state-controlled economy. Just listen to Bernie Sanders for a minute. Biden actually sounds more like Sanders, and Sanders sounds like Sanders these days. They want it from top to bottom. And one of the biggest financial firms in the United States, BlackRock, has been working on this, by the way, for years.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. Markets don't like uncertainty. Markets like actually totalitarian governments where you have a understanding of what's out there, and obviously the whole dimension is changing.
Markets like totalitarian governments, not this market, not the Bongino market. Listen, forget for a second the suicidal ESG obsession from the left, just for a moment. None of this stuff is new. The Democrats, our government, our comparisons to China. Democrats have been trying to nationalize not just the banks, but healthcare since Obamacare passed in 2010 without anyone even reading the bill. Now Biden wants to take away the risk from the banks. I thought they didn't like big banks, the Democrats. Ha! You fell for that. That's really funny. I'm talking to the libs, by the way. They are such suckers. They fall for everything. Oh, we're in it for the little guy. Really? You mean like the big banks? Because they just took all the risk off the big banks and put it on your back, the taxpayers. Listen, we all know where this is going. The left wants nothing more than to replace our paper dollar with a centralized bank digital currency. But it can't happen overnight. They need a crisis first, of course. First, the government has to back the banks after the crisis and effectively take them over before it can become the bank. You see how this works? There's a quick recap for you. Major bank goes under. Government swoops in and rescues it, eliminates the risk for the investors and depositors in the bank and puts it on the taxpayer, and effectively nationalizes the banks. And once they have complete control of our money, they have complete control of us, and it becomes kind of like turnkey tyranny. Just like communist China. But you can stop it. But you gotta vote. Joining me now is Chief Economist at Euro Pacific, Peter Schiff. Peter, you heard the monologue. Am I being hyperbolic? I mean, did we just effectively de facto nationalize our banks with this implicit guarantee?
Well, basically, and the implicit guarantee only applies to the banks that they like, right? The ones that they deem systemically important or too big to fail. What the U.S. government did is they created a run on all the smaller regional banks because they don't have the implicit guarantee. Your deposit is at risk at those banks if you have more than 250,000. And so now, perversely, what's happening is people are rushing to pull their money out of sounder, solvent banks and to put their money into insolvent banks. And so the opposite of what would happen during a free market.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, it's kind of odd that they keep claiming to be against big business and the big banks while making big business bigger and big banks bigger. I mean, Bank of America just got $15 billion. But on a second question for you, like me, I'm a big believer in assets, gold, real estate, because you can't print those things. But government is now printed, from the last date I just saw, hundreds of billions of dollars the Fed just created to backstop these banks. You've been warning about inflation for years. At some point, this has to filter into the economy, making the inflation crisis that causes worse.
Well, absolutely. The Fed just increased its balance sheet by $300 billion. It's back to quantitative easing, even though it hasn't officially admitted it. It's clearly doing it. It's buying government bonds and mortgage-backed securities and printing the money to pay for it. That's exactly what it did when it was doing QE, except the Fed had a two-pronged war against inflation, rate hikes and quantitative tightening. Well, it's not only given up quantitative tightening, it's doing quantitative easing aggressively, so it has gone back to creating inflation. It doesn't even matter if they hike rates at this point. They probably won't. But inflation bottomed out at 6%. It's going up from here. We've just begun a new easing cycle when inflation is more than triple the Fed's so-called target. That's why gold was up $60 today, $100 on the week. I think next week it's going to have an even bigger move.
Whew, gosh, you've called it before, Peter. Peter Schiff, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Hey, anytime.